Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Miss Tracey Brown. Hey, Tracey, thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, it's so great to be with you, Doc.
Yeah. So I want to read your resume because it's like really impressive and you've done a lot, been through a lot, so I'm excited to get into our conversation here so people can get to know you.
Awesome.
U.S. Coast Guard veteran and director of mentors at the Polk Institute Foundation. Tracey Brown is an internationally recognized speaker in the mindset industry with her signature speech, The Disease of Playing Small, featured in season 4 of the Amazon Prime video series Speak Up. And I'll let her tell you about her journey, but now she is the facilitator for Polk Institute Foundation on the topic of mental fitness for entrepreneurs, the Institute's director of mentors, and a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. She resides in Long Beach, California. All right. Well, Tracey, tell us about you, how you started out and your life story.
Well, it's kind of like all our life stories. Who was it that told me? One of my mentors, she was so funny. She goes, all of us are really that 6-year-old inside of us.
Mhm.
Somehow, some way, there's that 6-year-old that still has all those dreams. They just kind of get buried somewhere. So everything really starts with our childhood, where we were as kids and stuff. And mine. I tell people that I had a really great childhood, even though there was a lot of trauma. And I think we try to remember the good stuff. But my journey, my first book that I wrote really was on regarding my 30-year journey of undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's longer than that. That was just from the time I got out of the Coast Guard. But when I was 8, I was severely burned. And it was life threatening. It was not really great. This was way back in a galaxy long time ago, 1969. So they really didn't know what to do with me when I got burned at home. So imagine, if you will, that you're at a house with a couple other kids and you've got a babysitter, and all of a sudden one of the children is on fire and there's no 911. So, what do you do? And amazingly, one of the kids ran across the street and got the neighbors, and the neighbors took me to the hospital, but no burn units. So, you just go into emergency. And so it was very traumatic and a long process. Um, 10 years outpatient. We can go more into detail on that. But then I decided to go into the United States Coast Guard in 1983. Again, a long time ago. But they I was fortunate enough to go into small boat search and rescue. So a small boat then was a 41-foot. We used a utility boat because that's pretty much all we had in 1983. We were under the Department of Transportation, and so we did a lot of search and rescue. Most of the time it was search and recovery, hence the play on words for the book, rescue to recovery. Because again, imagine if you're going out with great expectations and really high, adrenaline, and ready to go rescue somebody, and more times than often than not, we would end up doing a recovery of a body.
Mm.
And that's extremely traumatic because you've got all these, your contingencies and your game plan and everything, and for naught. And so you don't really realize how things play on your psyche and on your soul until you kind of look back. And for years and years and years, I mean, that's kind of where the story starts of where I came as far as being an author and a speaker, is really just looking back on that and understanding that post-traumatic stress is not just people in combat. For years I was like, there's no way I could have that. I was never in combat. I never went through those kind of things that these guys went through, and yet here we are. And so many people. And so, a little backtrack, about 30 years ago, right around there, I started going back into the medical field. I became a physical therapist, physiotherapist. And about 12 or so years ago, I started specializing in scar tissue, oddly enough. But scar tissue is an amazing thing. And I started realizing the similarities between physical scar tissue and emotional scar tissue. And they have very, very interesting similarities. Yes, blunt force trauma can cause an injury, but repetitive use could too.
Mhm.
And when you think about post-traumatic stress, yes, there could be one incident that just puts you in this loop, or it could be a series of over and over and over repetitive. You think about, somebody that's in an abusive relationship or those kind of things. It creates the same issue. It creates this scarring. And unless we address it, just like physical scar tissue, if you don't address it, you lose range of motion, you
Mhm.
lose sensation. And the same thing happens to our psyche. We lose our range of emotions, you know, and we get this numbing. And so there's so many different, similarities that I was like, wow, I need to address these things if I want to move forward and have more flexibility in my emotional and just my life in general. So that's kind of how I got into the scar tissue therapy and writing and I love teaching. I love helping people and encouraging people and giving maybe just even giving people a new point of view, a different way to look at things. Because
Mhm.
sometimes that's all it takes for us to really make a choice in life, right?
Mhm.
Just a different point of view. And it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could do that. So that's me in a nutshell.
All
So
right. Thanks. So, um, I'm curious how you got into the Coast Guard. So I grew up in Port Huron, Michigan, and so
oh
we're right on Lake Huron. So the Coast Guard is very important in our
yeah,
little city there. It's very important. So
yeah.
what made you decide to choose that path?
Funny. My I call him my bonus dad. He's my stepdad. And every time that I would come home, because I was kind of a rebel rouser when I was younger, and every time that I'd come home for a barbecue or dinner or whatever, because he was a Navy guy, and he's like, you really should straighten your life out, and you should, go in the military. And I'm like, oh Lord, don't start this again, because all they do is tell you what to do, how to live, and da 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 da. And this just went on forever. And then my best friend, for some reason, I don't believe in any coincidences, by the way. I don't believe there are coincidences. Everything, there's a reason for everything. So
Mhm,
all of a sudden, my best friend is like, I'm thinking about going into the Coast Guard. I'm like, the what? She's like, the Coast Guard. And I'm like, well, is that like military? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, are you crazy? So I'm giving her the same excuses that I'm giving my stepdad. So
uh-huh,
I think out of spite, I'm just going to go find out what this is all about. So I can go tell my best friend how terrible this is.
mhm,
And somehow, some way, again, no coincidences, they're like, well, maybe you should take a test and maybe you should. And I'm like, well, this will be hysterical because I haven't taken an SAT in years. And this will be all these things. And then they call me a week later. It's like, you scored really high. We'd like to talk to you. And I'm like, are you joking? You're joking, right? And, one thing led to another. And all of a sudden, well, next thing I know, I'm like raising my hand going, yeah, I'll do this. And, it seemed like after talking, again, back to choices, right? The perspective was, I'm in kind of in a box right now. I'm not living my full potential. I'm not doing the best things that I could possibly do. And perhaps this is, God and all these wonderful things around me giving me this path to move towards a better future. And so that was the serendipitous leading of of great deities in my life.
so cool. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up near the water?
Yeah, I grew up in I'm a California kid, so I spent when I got burned at 8 years old, we were living in Huntington Beach, so that's Surf City, right?
Mhm,
So and just a water baby, I think I was swimming before I was walking.
mhm,
So mom had us in a pool and teaching us how to swim probably before we could walk.
mhm,
So always loved the water. Interesting though, after I got out of the Coast Guard, you don't really realize that you have post-traumatic stress because you can't read your own jar. You're inside and you can't see what's going on.
mhm.
And I didn't even go near the water. Well, I got on the water, didn't really go in the water for almost 20 years. Just
Interesting. You just
not even thinking that I'm avoiding it.
mhm,
Just it just wasn't a priority. And it's really interesting how we avoid things without even realizing how much we're avoiding things that really bring us joy. And
mhm,
then when I, 12 or 13 years ago, a friend of mine was a sailor and got me on a sailboat, and I'm like, oh wow, I've missed this.
Uh-huh.
It's really, really healing. The ocean has been extremely healing for me.
Yeah, that would be. And I think any time on the water is healing though. Again, growing up, in the Great Lake area. So it's just so healing, I think, to be near the water. But
Well,
for you,
and there's so much science behind it.
uh-huh.
Just the different change, the change in the ions, and just what it does, and how it just we're what, almost 80% water anyway as human beings, so of course why wouldn't it be healing? It's a grounding, it's a place of grounding, and it's just huge. It's big. Yeah.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
I think one of the differences might have been too, when you were in the Coast Guard, you were working. That
I
was
was
your
working.
working place. But
Yeah.
when you went on the sailboat with your friend, that was your relaxation. You didn't have responsibilities. You could just enjoy what was around you.
Yeah. And that's a big key. Joy is a big key that I like to talk a lot about. Yeah.
Mhm.
Finding that joy, finding your fun again, finding those things that just light you up. Huge, huge stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then you went into medical, you went into um, the scar tissue, which is what you dealt with as a child for months, years?
Years. Yeah, well, and
Years.
yeah, for a long I was an outpatient getting different surgeries because the burns affected my hands and my neck and my face. And so there was at at a young age, at 8, they didn't want to do too much surgery because you grow.
Mhm.
And so by the time I was, 14, 15, 16, there are certain things that they had to do because like my hand wouldn't function right because it was starting to web. So they had to, cut it and put a graft. And, the first graft was on my neck when I did get burned because it was just third, fourth degree burns that they had to put a graft on.
Mhm.
So a lot of different things they had to do to release it because again, scar tissue doesn't grow,
Mhm.
right? When you go back to the psyche, scars don't grow,
Mhm.
they restrict. And so yeah, it was a 10-year process of surgeries.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a long process.
It is a long process.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then when you were working with patients dealing with the same things, I'm sure that helped you in some way. How how is it how would you think you would be talking to them or dealing with them differently than someone who hadn't been through that experience?
That's really a great observation because I had innate empathy for them because I understood. I've been there. I know what it's like to I know what it's like to go through that process. And even before the scar tissue stuff, as a physiotherapist working with people just with certain injuries, I was an athlete all my life.
Mhm.
And then going into the Coast Guard, you're dealing with injuries. So you know, when I got into scar tissue therapy, I work with a very specific tool. Um, and so I basically worked on my whole body. And I can tell people, I've probably had every injury that I'm working on, whether it be ankles, knees, neck, hips, back, whatever it is. I've pretty much worked on myself. So I understand literally what they're going through as far as the process of the healing. And so, when you've gone through that, it's easy to encourage people through that and say, this is not a place where you will be stuck. This is not the end all. There's light at the end of this tunnel if you're willing.
Mhm.
And that's a big thing that I teach on. It's like, the only big question in life is what do you want?
Mhm.
Bob Proctor, who's like, he's one of my mentors that I never met. But he's quoting and he says, the only precursor to a decision is want.
Mhm.
So once you understand what you want, then you just have to decide what are you willing to do to get it, ethically, morally, um, just in legally, all
Mhm.
those things. So once you know what you want, if you want to be healed, if you want the healing process, what are you willing to do to get it? Are you, I work with a lot of people that need to lose weight. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to exercise 20 minutes a day? Are you willing to shift your diet a little bit? Because if you're not willing to do certain things, then we need to shift our expectations. But if you're willing, there are so many opportunities and so many places that we can start. And I like to keep things super, super simple, you know? Simple is not necessarily easy, but it is simple.
Mhm.
And so I like to keep everything that I do very simple. And it's like, let's just do one thing. Let's see if we can do that. Let's do another. And let's see if we can put some building blocks together to create what it is that you're trying to achieve. And then you can do that in any realm of your life,
Mhm.
business, relationships, leisure, whatever it is. You can take little steps, if you're willing to go into a process. But,
Mhm.
what are you willing to do?
Yeah. And that makes total sense because I know there's been situations where there's something I have to learn or even something I have to do or a project, and you look at the whole project and you're like, so
Ah,
overwhelmed. I don't know where to start, and
right.
sometimes you do need that mentor, that guide, that somebody to just say, just start at this corner over here. Just look at this
Hmm.
little spot
Hmm.
and let's just work on it. And
Yeah.
sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes if we imagine ourselves trying to do the whole thing, we just like we won't even start.
Yeah, well, paralysis through analysis, right? It's
Mhm.
like, look at this huge thing. It's like, are you kidding me? What's the joke? How do you eat an elephant? One
Mhm.
bite at a time. How do you put a puzzle together? Pick a piece. It doesn't matter. Just pick a piece and put it on the table. Now
Mhm.
find other things that fit. And I have to do things that because I go all ADD on myself, and I just start looking at things and I'll just set it down and go, nope, can't even do that. But if I can take one little picture, one little piece of it and go, I can figure that out.
Mhm.
Okay, now I can figure that out. And then you start seeing the puzzle come together and it's like, oh, that's what it is. I mean, you know, but giving ourselves enough grace to just take a deep breath and know that I don't have to know everything right now.
Mhm.
I don't have to know it all. All I need to know is this little piece right here. And if
Mhm.
I can know this piece and I can find another piece that fits there, I'm on my way. And being gracious to ourselves, I think, is a big start.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about the parallel between physical scars and emotional scars. How is it that they're the same and how do we work with that? Especially in like the emotional realm.
Well, it's really interesting because the way it kind of came to me was I was working on one of my patients, and we were talking about, I try to set people up for success, and I try to let them know what they're looking at. And so, I talk a little bit about how the mechanism of an injury. And so, what happens is the the tissue, everything around it starts to shut down. Okay. The minute you have an injury, if it's a blunt force injury, what happens is it's kind of like a stinger. Everything just stops and you can't move that. You can't move it. Well, that's kind of the pause that the body has. Well, in physical or in emotional, we do the same thing. Something that nobody told me until I started going through some really amazing therapy through the VA, awesome enough, um, was that post traumatic stress, every single human being goes through it. And I didn't know that. I thought that I had post traumatic stress disorder, the D, and I thought I was broken.
Mhm.
I was broken, and now we don't know how to fix it because now you're broke. Now you're broken. It's like a toy. It's like now your toy is broken, and now you don't get to play with it. It's not like that. Every single human being that has ever been through any kind of trauma has gone through stress after the trauma. The body does that. and
Mhm.
we and we pause. There's this pause, and that's what that is. And some people stay in that pause depending upon their disposition and all that stuff. I stayed in that pause. I call it the loop.
Mhm.
So so that's a similarity that the physical body goes through and the emotional brain goes through, and the emotions go through. So how do you get out of that? Well, when it comes to physical therapy, you see somebody that understands how it works. If you don't,
Mhm.
right? If you break your ankle, you're not going to go at home and go, okay, I'm going to be the doctor and I'm going to set this in. No,
No.
you actually go to somebody that knows what to do with that. And then they give you the process to go through it.
Mm.
Well, I missed that. I didn't do that process. I thought I'm fine. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. even though there were so many telltales. I didn't respond. I started realizing that I wasn't responding to certain emotional triggers that other people were. I was responding differently. I was finding myself very irritable. I started looking at some of the characteristics of post-traumatic stress, and that was after a friend posted it on social media.
Hmm.
She had gone through it, so she posted 16 characteristics, and I'm going, because I'm an information hound, and I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. Let's look at this. And I'm like, oh, I had 14 of them,
Oh.
and I'm like, oh wow, maybe there's something here, because I didn't know I had broken my ankle, right? I didn't know I didn't know, and so that kind of made me go, still wasn't ready, right?
Mhm.
At some point in our lives, when it comes to an emotional distress or post-traumatic stress or whatever it is, at some point in our life, our desire to get beyond it has to be greater than the fear of being or of being in it or getting out of it. You know what I mean? Our something has to push us beyond that fear. And so what pushed me is I'd been wanting to write a book most of my life. And a friend who became my writing coach, actually, who's a writing coach, she said, let's write a book in 30 days. And I'm like, I've been waiting 30 years. And I go, 30 days sounds good. I got to the point where it's starting to write and I was completely blocked. Right. So my impetus was my desire to write my book was bigger than my fear of looking at all the things were keeping me from writing the book.
Mhm.
So at some point we have to get to a place where something is greater than our fear. Something that we want. It goes back to what do you want? What are you willing to do to get it?
Mhm.
Right. And so I knew what I wanted and I was willing to go through what I need. So I took a pause on the book for a year and did some really intense therapy to
Mhm.
figure out why I was blocked, why I couldn't tap into these things.
Mhm.
But it's an individual decision. Everybody's got to come to a place, and whether you've got post traumatic stress or not, we all have things that we want to do. We all have these desires. We all have these dreams. We all have that little 6-year-old, right? We
Mhm.
all have something in us that goes, I'd really like to do that. Okay, what are you willing to do to get it?
Mhm. Yeah, it
In
can,
absolute love and grace with yourself, being kind.
right. You also made
Yeah.
another
So
good point is take the time to take care of yourself.
take the
So
time to
you get
take
to
care.
a block and you're like, okay, how am I going to unblock this? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to be loving and caring and graceful with myself
Yep.
and find someone to help me move through this
Yep.
harder part in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I came to the realization that if I were to if I would only just talk to myself as I would talk to a 5-year-old, because who what kind human being is going to go up to a 5-year-old and go, "Oh, you idiot! Why?" Blah, 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 blah,"
Mhm.
You don't do that to. I
No.
was talking to myself like I was this terrible human being, and it's like self-talk is huge.
Hmm.
How am I treating me? And so I made a decision to start caring for myself as if I would care for a 5-year-old. How would you talk to them? How would you encourage them? How would you move them towards their dreams,
Hmm.
right? And so I just started being nice to myself, and that's a big shift. That was a big shift for me
Hmm.
because I was always, telling myself terrible things, and that's a big step in a right direction, is being kind to yourself.
Hmm.
And talk is huge. That's one of my 3 points that I talk a lot about is excellence in our language, whether we're speaking to ourselves or speaking to others, because excellence in our language creates empowerment.
Hmm.
And so when we can do that, we can shift a lot of things, not only in our own space, but we can start some ripples that would change the world.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about, when you're working with those patients and things, um, how much does our mind affect what ends up in our bodies?
A huge amount. A huge amount. I know that I could not quote the studies, but I know that there's a lot of studies when they talk about positivity in seeing your outcome. And if you think about a visualization in and of itself. So if you look at elite athletes, top athletes, the Olympics are coming up, right? So the Summer Olympics are fun because you can really, Winter Olympics, people are all bundled up and a lot of times you don't get to see things. But, divers, I remember watching divers when I was younger, and they would be on the diving board, eyes closed, and you see them doing all these kind of things. And it's like they're literally visualizing themselves doing every move that they're doing before they get into the water.
Mhm.
Well, science shows that if you just see these things in your mind, all the same muscle groups are firing off in your body. You're not doing them, but those are firing off.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite experiments that I do when I'm doing speaking engagements is I bring a lemon on stage and I tell them, I go, okay, great. Y'all see this lemon. Y'all know what a lemon is, right?
Uh-huh.
And I said, I'm going to bite into this. And I want to raise of hands to see if anybody has any kind of reaction. And the minute I bite into the lemon, every single person almost raises their hand and say that they salivated.
Mhm.
What happened there? Well, all they did was see somebody, but you see it or you express it, and there are physical manifestations. So when I work with people, I tell them you have a huge amount of power in this process. You have a huge amount of power in the process of healing.
Mm.
And that was another trigger for me when I was kind of doing the whole thing with the emotions too. I have a lot of power in this.
Mhm.
I am not powerless. I am powerful in this. And
Mhm.
so we have the same with our physical healing as we do our emotional healing. You have a lot of power in the choices that you make. You have a lot of power in the way you choose to approach this. You have a lot of power in the language you choose to use around it. And you have a lot of power if you choose to visualize positive things coming out of it.
Mhm.
So I really encourage people to, and not to say that discouraging things or negative things don't come up, but we have the choice to either dwell on those because what you dwell on stays around, right? Or you can choose to flip that script and go, you know what, that could be an outcome, or this could be a really great outcome if this and this and this, and I did this and this and this, that can happen.
Mhm.
And just changing our mindset around it, our that's why I call it mental fitness.
Mhm.
I don't talk about mindset because that's kind of really ethereal for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But mental fitness, if you think about what physical fitness is, being fit is just being stronger than whatever it is you're walking into,
Mhm.
preparing yourself for that, right? So yeah, just working on our mental fitness is a huge game changer in our lives.
Mhm. So you were in the military, you went into medical, but now you have a topic you talk about mental fitness for entrepreneurs. So how does
Yes,
this
at the Polk
relate to
Institute.
business?
Oh, this is the fun part. This is really fun because if you think about it, do you know who Jim Rohn is?
Mhm. Yes.
Jim Rohn is awesome. And one of his great quotes was, and he was a great man, one of his great quotes was, work more on yourself than you do on your business. Because if you do that, your business will take care of itself because we are our business, especially entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I teach in the mental fitness class is there's a lot of things, but one of them is that if you are people are buying you, they will buy you before they buy your product. Many times they may not even need your product, but they like you so much because of who you are and your authenticity and all that stuff. They want to support you.
Mhm.
So you are your product. So if you are not authentic, if you're not working on your character, if you don't have, certain, integrity and those kind of things, then business is going to be difficult,
Mhm.
right? Because these are what businesses are: respect, loyalty, integrity, honesty. These are the things that businesses are built on. So when we talk about mental fitness, it's all about working on your character, working on your language. Words create actions, actions create habits, habits create, um, character. So these are things that you work on in business. And the other thing is, mental fitness is understanding that if you go into the corporate world, you climb the corporate ladder, right? Everybody's
Mhm.
like, okay, you just here's this wrong, and here you. Entrepreneurship is, I tell them, it's like you're not on a corporate ladder, you're on the entrepreneurial roller coaster,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
you know this because
Yes.
this is what you're doing here.
Mhm.
And so, there's some days it's like, oh, that was awesome. That was a great day. Everything went awesome. And the next day, or even in hours, it can be like, what just happened? The whole, it's like you're just up and down, and understanding that it's a roller coaster. And, we go back to, Napoleon Hill, talking about in his book, Master Class. And, if you're not engaged in a labor of love in your life, you're wasting a lot of time in your life.
Mhm.
Because even if you're digging a ditch, the joy of it takes the labor out of it. And
Mhm.
so one of the things in our mental fitness class, we talk to the entrepreneurs, and it's like, if you are not madly in love with this idea, if this is not something that you really, really want to do, that you're passionate about, stop now and find something that you are.
Mhm.
Because it's going to take energy and tenacity and long hours, and passion will get you through that. The joy of watching this come through is going to get you through that laborious time. And so, we talk a lot about, character and what it takes, and how there's a reason why most small businesses don't succeed, right? Because mindset,
Mhm.
mental fitness. Are you ready to go into this? It's like, I'm not going to send somebody into the Olympics unless they're physically fit.
Mhm.
So why would I throw somebody to the den of lions of entrepreneurship if they're not mentally fit? There's certain components that you've got to have understanding going into this, you know, along with finance and marketing and all these other things that you need to have. But if you don't understand the mental fortitude that it takes to go into this, it's going to be a shocking experience, and you're going to have a difficult time. So
Yeah.
we really dive into, how do we change our brain? How do we, if we're a natural person that looks at things, glass half empty, how do we shift our brain to look at it half full or refillable? That's my thing. Half empty, half full, doesn't matter. It's refillable.
Mhm.
Just pour some more water in, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, we talk a lot about that in mental fitness, because for entrepreneurs, and, think about it. It's just a little microcosm of life. It's a little picture of what life is like, and why not be fit? It's so much easier to go through life when you're fit,
For
you know?
sure. And, entrepreneurship can be actually very lonely sometimes. So,
We
you
talk a
want
lot
to
about that.
develop yourself so that, the people you do work with, you have a good relationship with. But um, getting that support as an entrepreneur, whether it be through courses or mentors or other
Yeah,
business owners, is just like so important.
yeah.
And, there's a big difference between people who succeed. Um, Usually the people who succeed the biggest are the ones who have the most support or people behind them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, one of the many things that I love about the Polk Institute is their mantra is getting people financially fit, getting them ready to be supported financially, and to be uh, to pitch, basically. And one of the key things is you can't do it alone. Anybody that wants to finance, or that's looking into financing a startup, they're looking for a team.
Mhm.
And team is important, and finding the people, and it's not necessarily like-minded people. A lot of times it's finding that person that's opposite you, that's
Mhm.
going to complement you. And Polk is amazing at really teaching that and ingraining that. It's like, if you want to be pitching to, whether it's banks or private investing or whatever it is, the first thing you need to do is find your team, because you're right, entrepreneurship is very lonely, and you need people around you that are like-minded and moving in the same direction.
Yeah. So
And it's
just
huge.
so people, oh, sorry. I just wanted to ask you, what is Polk Institute Foundation? Because maybe not everyone knows what that is.
Right. No, sorry. Polk Institute was started by a gentleman named Gary Polk, and he's an awesome, awesome man. He's a professor at Dominguez Hills College, and he had an incubator there for years with the college students. 2020 comes around, and a lot of things changed, right? So he decided that he wanted to start an online institute And part of his vision is kind of like the military academies. There's only a few academies that are tuition free, and he's like, why not start a tuition free academy? And so it's a bold leap, and it's but they have such amazing instructors and a great vision. And you can go to polkinstitute.org and you can learn all about it. Uh, we just started February our fourth cohort, so it launched in 2020, and we're in our fourth year, as it were,
Mhm.
and it just gets better every year. It's a business course basically for entrepreneurs, for social entrepreneurs. And the bottom, the triple P, which is people, planet, profit, it's brilliant, you know.
Mhm.
And we have people, and we cater to everybody, but we have a focus on Black, brown, women, and and veterans.
Mhm.
So all veterans, all women, the Black and brown communities, anybody and everybody's welcome. But we really try to do a big reach out to and this month, May being Military Appreciation Month,
Mhm.
we're really trying to get the word out to a lot more veterans. Veterans make great entrepreneurs. They've been trained so well by our military, that and a lot of them do well because um, a lot they've been through a lot, so it's sometimes easier to build their own business. And so it's pretty amazing. And they have the skill sets, right?
Mhm.
And so we provide a platform, a place where you can learn finance, where you can learn marketing, you can learn stuff about that you need for HR, that mental fitness, um, name it. They go through everything that you really would need in a business. And it's a brilliant platform.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful, wonderful resource.
Yes,
And
huge.
you
And
know,
anybody can apply. Anybody can apply. Just go to the website and apply.
that's I'll make sure and put that in the show notes. So it's polkinstitute.org, you said?
Bookinstitute.org.
Okay, I'll make sure and put that in
Yeah.
there.
And if you know anybody, or anybody out here in listening land, if you know anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur and needs some direction, go to that website and start the process. One chunk at a time, one step at a time, and they'll walk you through it. It's a wonderful, wonderful group of people. Really. Yeah, I feel extremely blessed to have found them. I think they found me. I was doing a
Mhm.
speech in Vegas, and the COO approached me. It was very funny because, one of the things that I teach is, understanding what you want. And when you know what you want, it's easy to say yes to things and easy to say no to things,
Mhm.
right? Because it's either on your path or it's not. And
Mhm.
he came to me and told me about this, and it was one of the easiest yeses I've ever had. Would you teach a mental fitness class? Yes. That is right up my alley. That was the easiest yes I ever had, you know? So understanding your world, it makes it, and when you say no, you can bless people too. That's an amazing idea. That's really awesome. It's not on my path, but bless
Mm.
you. That's awesome. Go. Yeah.
Exactly. It's good to know what your path is.
It's huge. It keeps you from, blowing all over the place, right?
Mhm.
Keeps you focused and keeps you moving forward, and gracious and kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say thank you for your service.
Like,
And,
you were worth it, as somebody told me to say. You were worth it, and everybody else that's out there.
yes, and thank you to everyone, past, present, and whoever in the future will be serving our country. Just bless you and thank you for that.
Amen. I'm with you. Yeah.
Yes, and I had a question about that. So, you went into the military quite a few years ago, and now the military is different. We even have like what is it, the Space Force and
Hmm.
other things. If someone in their who's 18, 19, 20, if they were thinking about going into the military now,
Mm.
what kind of advice would you give them?
That is a question that I've never actually been asked before, but I like it. That's a great question. And you know what I would say again, go back to what you want, right? because my stepdad, bless his heart, he was trying to point me towards the Navy, and I'm thinking I don't want to be out on a boat for 6 months. And my friend's talking about Coast Guard, and I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. It was more up my alley, right?
Hmm.
Being on small boats, being on a small boat station, being by the water. I'm like, okay, that's so really think about what your strengths are, and take the time to think about it. Don't just make a crazy, decision. It's a big decision because they're going to ask you for 4 to 6 years. That's 4 to 6 years of your life minimum. And then you may end up spending 20 of there. You don't know. But take a moment to ask yourself, what would I like to get out of this? You know, my cousin went into army, and it was just right up her alley. She's like, this is great. It was great. But take the time to think about it. Do you want to be a pilot? Go into the Air Force. You want tech, and you want, a lot of the stuff, because the Space Force is really a lot of cyber stuff. People think Space Force like spaceships, but it's a lot of cyber security and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So maybe that's a tech space that you want to go into, you know? Maybe when I first went in, I wanted to fly helicopters. My dad was a pilot. And I was like, oh, I can fly helicopters. And then they said, well, you're too short. And I'm like, well, that was rude. Um, Dare you say that I'm too short? But to fly a helicopter, you need to be able to touch the pedals and reach everything up above. And
Uh-huh.
so, of course, in their kind, somewhat condescending, I think, way, it's like, you'd be great on small boats. It's like, are you saying I'm small? What? Um, but but it was a funny conversation. But they were right, low center of gravity, small boat, and it worked out really great. And it didn't hit my head on anything. Um, but yeah, so ask yourself, what would I want to get out of this? What am I getting into? And understand what you're getting into, you know, and understand that boot camp is tough. That's 8 weeks of yes sir and saluting trees, and I mean it's like they're trying to break you. That's their job, because they can break you. Certainly anybody else can. So it's not easy, but it's amazing. I think it's one of the most amazing. It was one of the greatest things that I ever did, because it actually showed me things that I could actually do. You do things and it's like, wow, I never knew I could do that. And that's a big feeling. That's a very empowering feeling when you do something that you think is so far out of reach for you, and you do it and you're like, that's hugely empowering. And it's very confident, building confidence, and it's a great space. And you just, you're around so many different people, and I would encourage anybody, really. It's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, but
So,
know what you're getting into.
yeah, ask a lot of people, right?
That's
Who've
a lot
been
of people. Don't just jump in. Yeah, yeah.
at it. So, at this point, I'd like you to tell people, like, if they wanted to connect with you, where do they connect with you? What are you doing now where they can connect? You said you're speaking, you're teaching. Just this is where you kind of this is your advertisement spot.
This is my advertising spot. Well, they can find me. They can find me on my website, www.rescue2recovery.com. That's where my book is. You can book me for speaking engagements. I love to speak to groups, whether it's big, small, otherwise. Depending upon the group, I do have a scale as far as charging for my time. They can get my book there if they so choose. I'm working on my second book. So my first book was really my journey through 30 years of post-traumatic stress.
Mhm.
And it's again, it's not just for veterans or anybody, but it's great for anybody that you know that might have been through something. I tell some stories from the Coast Guard. I tell some other stories, but they're all life lessons, right? So they're all kind of tied into, here's how I kind of figured some stuff out. Maybe this will help you too.
Mhm.
So that's what that book is about. This next one is going to be more about minding your mind, really work, understanding choice and understanding things that we have so much power over. And so I'm about halfway through that. That hopefully will be out soon. We've had some setbacks because we've had some family um, things. So as far as taking care of some health issues, but um, That'll be out sooner than later if all goes well and the creek don't rise, as they say. And then teaching at Polk Institute. I just finished doing the workshop in April. So April is our mental fitness workshop, and yeah, doing a lot of podcasts, and I've got a couple speaking engagements coming up. But I love talking to either corporations, small groups. Um, I like helping people understand that they have a lot of choices. They just need to kind of figure that out, that they do. Give them different perspectives on things, and helping to make good choices as far as, language, and uh and finding fun in your life. I mean, a lot of people have lost their fun, and it's just imperative to just, you know, my, I have one of my favorite quotes that I've coined is gratitude is the gateway to joy because joy is the gateway to strength,
Mm.
you know? And so how do we get strong if we're feeling weak? Well, start with gratitude, and that'll get you into a space of joy, and joy is strength, you know? So
That is profound, really. That is
it's
profound.
and it's so easy. It's so
Mhm.
simple. Not easy. But anytime you find yourself down, and there was a time in my life when I was so depressed, and I was really, really depressed. And all I could come up with, somebody said, be grateful. I'm like, okay. And, it was hard, but, I could say, I'm thankful that I have a warm bed.
Mhm.
I'm so thankful that I have warm water.
Mm.
I've got food on my table. And,
Yeah.
and if you've got that, you're rich,
Yeah.
right? There's so many places in this world they don't even have running water, let alone clean water, let alone warm water.
Mhm.
So when you can be in gratitude, your next step is joy, because gratitude leads to joy.
Mhm.
And then you can start finding strength, and then you can start making more decisions and better decisions for yourself. But you got to start, you got to take that bite.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gratitude.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I really love that.
Yeah.
So now I have a personal question. What
Okay.
gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
It really is being in a position to be able to encourage others. When I can it it's really true, the saying that um giving is better than receiving. And it's almost selfish, because when you give of yourself, when you give to others, when you're really doing that out of just the kindness, and just with no other motivation other than to bless, it's almost selfish.
Mhm.
You can think of it, because there's so much that comes back from that.
Yes.
It's beyond fulfilling. It's beyond it's just so fun. And so
Mhm.
I get so much joy from being able to encourage somebody and then watch them take a step. It's there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it when you've encouraged somebody to do something and they do it. And I see that in my patients all the time. We have so much fun, because it's like, I'm doing work on them, and it's like, now here's your homework. You can do this, this, and this, and this. And if you do that,
Mhm.
between what I'm doing with you and you're doing, you're going to see amazing results.
Mhm.
And when they do it and they go, "Oh my gosh," it's ridiculous. We just giggle. It
Mhm.
makes me really happy. So it sounds kind of corny, but it it it's so joyous when you can encourage somebody to do something and they do it. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Just makes me happier and happy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for your stories, your advice, your vulnerability.
I love doing this too is another place of joy, to just be able to share some things. And if one person goes, maybe I could dot dot dot, from anything that we do out here in ether land, how cool is that, right?
Mhm.
And if two, great. And if somebody says, wow, this is a great podcast, you really need to listen to that, and they get blessed, that's so cool. It's just so cool. And I thought my world was going to fall apart, because my first book was actually published in 2020. And so I get it I get the physical copy in March, and I've got like five book signing signed up, and we know what happened then. Everything shut down. I'm like, wow. Well, that that kind of sucked, but
Uh-huh.
it didn't. There's always that silver lining, and I just did the pivot and went digital, and I have more fun on podcasts, especially with people like you, doctor, because you just you've got a really kind demeanor, and you're interested, and I thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I think it, it just it gives people opportunity. People can just go bink, and they can learn a plethora of things, and they can tap into so many things with a push of a button. How cool. And so it turned out to be a really, really amazing blessing, you know? So, and then, I just had to figure out the digital world and say, okay, well, I'm not going to be signing books in here. So we'll have to put it on the website. And I don't know how to do that. And
Mhm.
one chunk at a time, and had people, I need help, and people help. And lo and behold, I have a website where you can push a button and order a book. I mean, it's
So
kind of
cool.
cool. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So yeah, so when life throws you lemons, make some lemonade.
That's
And so we've
great.
been making a lot of lemonade, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah. So I have one last question.
Yes.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
We covered this. Be honest with yourself. Be absolutely honest with yourself, and really take the time to figure out what it is that you're here for. Figure out, go back to that 6-year-old, or whatever it takes for you to do, because I'm telling you, it's in you. If you've even had a glimpse of a vision, if you've had a glimpse of something, if you can see it, then it's in you to do it. You just got to take those bites and figure out how to get there. But my biggest advice is figure out what it is that you want, what you're willing to do to get it. Figure out why and what. It's the why and the what of life, right? Because if you know why you want something and what you're willing to do to get it, then the how will always come.
Mhm.
The how will always come, because it's there for you to do, you know? It's like a game of get the flag. It's like, oh, I need to go get this flag. And it's like, go get the flag. And then you'll go get the next one. And just, but take the time. Take the time to really, and even if it's you're going to set aside 10 minutes a day, if that's all you can come up with, 10 minutes a day, to ask yourself, what do I want? And dig deep into that. I want this. Why? Well, because this. Why? Because this. Why? And get to that. And once you figure that out, I promise you there will be no stopping you, because it's in you to do if you've got a glimpse of it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Tracy.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I just appreciate you setting this up, and bless you, and bless everybody out there in Etherland, as I like to call it. And go get it what you want, because it's there for you. It really is. If you can see it, you can have it. If you can see it in your mind, you can have it in your hand, as they say.
Right. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.
I hope so.